Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to take this video nice and slow because I am getting sick. My voice is going. Hopefully I just have a throat cold, and it's not like a strep throat or anything, but something down there is kicking my ass. So, definitely going to be hearing me grunting and coughing a little bit. But before my voice goes completely and you guys don't get any videos from me for a couple days, I just wanted to make this video real fast because I saw something S-Fan said, which I both agree with and completely disagree with, depending upon how he's saying it. So later in this video, he says that giving Paladins Crusader Strike is won't fix the problem and is a terrible idea, and I agree completely. But let's just hear what he says right now. Again, I'm going to take this nice and slow, going to talk softly, you know the drill.
Is pretty cool. So, yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen with Classic. Like if they're gonna do like a Season of Mastery 2, Classic Plus, whatever it is. But like I have a lot of thoughts about what I think they should do. Like I've talked a lot about how people keep saying they should like add Crusader Strike for Paladins, or give certain classes certain abilities. And I think that's like putting the cart before the horse. I think if you are gonna make class changes, it starts with like the under the hood stuff, changing like how like what stats affect certain things, like something being based off of spell hit instead of melee hit, or like a spell power coefficient or something like that.
All right.
Would you hardcore to someone new to WoW? I wouldn't.
All right. So I agree completely with what he's saying, and I disagree at the same time. So I agree with the Crusader Strike part, obviously. Not that the Crusader Strike is the worst thing in the world. It just doesn't really do anything to specifically solve the problem. And I made a few talking points to talk about this here for a second. So if anybody knows anything about Paladin under the hood, it's definitely me. And when somebody tells me changing what's underneath the hood for classic WoW Paladin, that's the part that causes me to cock my eyebrow, and I might disagree heavily. And the reason for this is there's just not a lot of design space to change. Like, specifically off the top of my head, Consecration comes to mind just because its spell power coefficient is 40% over 8 seconds, which is just god awful. But other than that, everybody else is in this weird spell power coefficient space that you can't really touch them without breaking them to a large degree. But there are ways around this, obviously. So I'll give you an example, right? So one place S-Fan might be talking about is the spell power ratio on Seal of Command, which is 30%. Or you might be talking about the proc chance of Seal of Command, which is 7 ppm. 1 proc per 9 seconds of swing time. There we go. How do I say this? When I do the math on Seal of Command, though, its spell power ratio is actually somewhat. It's competitive with Seal of Righteousness. On top of everything else that Seal of Command has got going for it, like the spell power alone coefficient on Seal of Command is competitive with Seal of Righteousness. The only thing that doesn't make it competitive with Seal of Righteousness is the fact that you can get 19% spell power out of Seal of Righteousness rank 3 on like the fastest weapon possible. That's the only thing that doesn't make it competitive. But you factor in every other thing that's going on. Get out of here. Every other thing that goes on with Paladin. I want to pause the video and bring up Wowhead real fast here so we can look at the talent tree in order to talk about this. All right, cool, we're back. So, but when you factor in every other thing that's going on here with Seal of Command, so for example, you might have Sanctity Aura up, which is plus 10%. Two-handed weapon specialization will increase the seal damage you do by an additional 6%, so that's on top of that. Then you have Vengeance increasing spell power by like 15%. By the time it's all said and done, she's closer to like a 45% spell power ratio rather than a 30% spell power ratio, and very quickly she becomes competitive with Seal of Righteousness. The only difference being that Seal of Righteousness can go one-handed and become a super speedy boy, but you have to use a super low rank of Seal of Righteousness to get it done. Then, of course, there's the proc chance. And Lord knows I've done enough math on Seal of Righteousness as compared to Seal of Command to know that if you so much as tickle the proc rate of Seal of Command, it will start blowing SOR out of the water. But then you could talk about buffing SOR, and that's just a place you don't want to go in general because SOR already is kind of insane. Like it could be buffed a little bit. So the easiest way to deal with this, obviously, is that you give Paladin and other classes that are deficient in raiding contexts, from a DPS perspective, from a mana efficiency perspective, whatever the hell it is, you give them buffs upon entering raid. Like the sheer act of entering and being in a raid buffs the class, right? That way you maintain PvP balance outside of the raid, but within the confines of the raid, these classes actually do get some buffs. So what might that look like? Well, Seal of Command might actually literally get a name change when you enter a raid, and it would have additional effects behind it, or a greater proc chance, or whatever the heck. Crusader Strike is... Crusader Strike is a potential solution to the problem, but it's not very well in line with Paladin, classic World of Warcraft Paladin class identity in general, and it's also super, super boring. Yes, I know you get an additional button to press, but that's not Paladin class identity. So we need to talk about why Crusader Strike really isn't a very good solution at all. It has to do with what you're competing against, the power of what you're competing against, what you are competing against, exponential scaling. Damn, that's a lot of in a row. Exponential. Then it has to do with the fact that it's out of line with Paladin class identity, and it's just a boring way to deal with it. And then, of course, I'll talk about a solution. So I'm gonna jump the gun and give you a solution example before we talk about why it's not the worst idea in the world. Okay. So imagine if you enter a raid as a Paladin and Seal of Command effects change somewhat. And what happens to Seal of Command is that its proc chance is increased by a flat percentage chance equal to your critical strike chance. So if you entered a raid and you had a 30% crit chance with Seal of Command, or with your auto attack in general, it would increase the proc chance of Seal of Command by 30% per weapon swing, regardless of weapon speed. And that's a very important distinction, because what it means is Seal of Crusader and Seal of Command already are super boring with their gearing because they want the slowest two-handed weapon that you can possibly get your hands on, and they're super, super suck with a one-hander. Like Seal of Command and one-hander is just like, what the hell are you doing? Get out of here. There's no synergy here whatsoever. You're literally going backwards with damage and efficiency compared to Seal of Righteousness. However, if you give them a flat proc chance and you link it to another stat such as crit, then it makes the waters much more nebulous. And this has to do with the third thing here, which is Paladin class identity in classic World of Warcraft. So the class identity of Paladins in classic WoW is that they are literal auto attack Andes. Literal auto attack Andes. We don't have Seal. We don't have a button we can press that instantly gives us an extra auto attack in classic World of Warcraft. We are just white. If you don't know what Seal attack, auto attack Andy means, it just means white hits only. Like your basic weapon swing is all that we do. However, what's fascinating about the class is that underneath the hood of Paladin, behind that I'm doing nothing but just swinging my basic bitch auto attack at you, are some insane and very fascinating and nebulous, like, interactions and ratios and stuff. That Paladins have a shit ton going on with their auto attack underneath the hood that make the class much, much more powerful than it should be, and far, far more interesting and dynamic in its gearing. So you would want any change that you would want to make to a Paladin, if you wanted to keep it in line with a a classic World of Warcraft Paladin class identity, it would have to match this insanity of dynamics, which is the thing is nothing but an auto attack Andy, but there's so much going on underneath the hood that she becomes very, very dynamic and very, very interesting, very, very quickly. Adding adding Crusader Strike to the mix is not in line with classic World of Warcraft class identity, and as we're going to see in a second, it does nothing to actually solve the problem. Meanwhile, what else I want to say? Yeah, something more akin to what I just said definitely comes closer to solving the problem, but it would be so overtuned and overpowered that you wouldn't really want it to exist outside of a raiding context. Like, not even in normal 5-man dungeons would you want that damn ability to exist. All right, so the main issue of contention has to do with the power of dual wielding and versus two-hander in classic World of Warcraft. If anybody knows the disparity between these two things, and this on the subject of Paladin specifically, holy crap, it's probably me. So you'll notice in classic WoW that the top melee DPS are both dual wielders. It's a Fury Warrior and it's a Rogue, and they're both dual wielding. You'll also note that Warrior has access to some very powerful two-handed capability, and yet their in-raid DPS is complete and utter dog shit compared to when they are dual wielding. The reason for this is because the power behind dual wield. Damn it. I have to start with the two-hander. The power behind two-hander, like what you gain from going one-hander to two-hander in classic World of Warcraft, is nowhere near as much as you would think. What you're gaining is literally plus 30% weapon damage. Let me see if I can showcase this real fast here. Although I'm really going to want to come right back again. I don't want dressing room. No. We want tools. We want gear planner. We want Paladin. We want human. Okay, cool. So you can see here I've got a level 40, requires level 47, a level 47 blue that's doing 44.8 damage, and it's got some stats on it and stuff, right? If I were to compare that to a weapon equivalent, I want another 47-ish weapon, but I want it to be a one-hander. If I compare that to a one-hander here, you can see it's 28 DPS. That's a terrible comparison because this Crystal Forged is, I don't want Mugahurt. Alright, so I'm looking for a two-hander here. Lights, nah, I guess that is fine. Level 45. Compare the level 45 to another level 45. Might take a sec here. Yeah, there we go. That's better. So this level 40 requires level 40. Damn it. Scrolling down some more. Thank you. Two-hander. Two-hander. One-hander. Thank you. Okay. What the... Oh, it's item level. Oh, I'm stupid. Let's go back up to item level 45 then. Jesus. I put on an item level 45, but then it says requires level blah, blah, blah. Celsius lamp. No. That's a one-hander. Okay. This is not right. Main hand. Okay, that's a two-hander, you dumbass. Jackhammer. Where was the two-hander? Heaven's Light. Main hand. Celsius. Curve blade. Now I'm looking for a damn two-hander. What is it, scuffed? Okay, this is interesting. Wow, what the hell? Yikes. Anyways, this thing says I'm stunned by how good this Uldaman drop two-hander is. A 2.5 speed weapon with a chance on hit to increase your attack speed by 30% for 10 seconds. Holy crap. Where the hell has this been all my life? Give me this damn thing. That's amazing. Anyways, you can see how it's only gone up a little over 9 DPS. And if you actually crunch the number on this stupid thing, it's literally, if I go 30 times 1.3, which would be a 30% increase, boom. So you can see that the two-handed weapons are doing 30% more white damage, white DPS, than the one-handers. But literally ask yourself, what else do they have got going on besides that? And the answer is basically nothing. Because if I was wearing... let's say I was wearing 100 DPS worth of attack power gear, and my weapon, I make my two-handed weapon go up plus 30% damage. What is my actual DPS increase going from a one-hander to a two-hander? And the answer is, my attack power is going to still be 100 DPS. And then my one-hander, what the hell is this thing that keeps popping up? Just fuck off. Then my one-hander literally went from doing 30 DPS to 39 DPS. So I went from doing 100, fuck off, just go away. I went from doing 130 damage to 139 damage. It's like, congratulations, you didn't even get a 10% damage increase. Now it's not quite that bad in Classic World of Warcraft. It more accurately looks something like going from a one-hander to a two-hander increases your overall DPS by like 15 percent or something like that, but it's actually less than that. It's closer to like 12%, but it's absolutely pathetic, and you can see that it is not really scaling with anything in and of itself. The only thing that two-handers actually scale with are abilities. All right, so now I want a talent tree. Dressing room, talent calculator, paladin. So for example, if you're a warrior, two-handed is scaling with whirlwind. It's scaling with overpower. It's scaling with mortal strike. It's scaling with abilities that are on a set cooldown, such as a 10-second cooldown like whirlwind, where when you press the ability, it just does weapon damage to the target. So you want the slowest, biggest, fattest weapon that you can get your hands on, such as a two-handed weapon, which is exactly what Seal of Command does, right? Every 9 seconds, Seal of Command is giving you essentially an extra auto attack that you're putting into your enemy. Now, there's a lot going on behind the scenes of that auto attack. Trust me, I know, right? There's vengeance involved. The fact that it's double dipping off of vengeance, it's also double dipping off of two-handed weapon specialization. If you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, basically it's like it takes your weapon, it takes your white damage and it converts it into spell power, and then you have these annoying things that say I increase my both my physical damage by 15% and my holy damage by 50%, and then what that means is when Seal of Command procs, expect a 30% damage increase, and then the two-handed weapon specialization is 6%, but with as far as the Seal of Command proc is concerned, it might as well say it does 12%. Because it's going to increase both the white damage by 6% and the Seal of Command damage by 6%. It might as well just be next additional vengeance effect, basically. That is what two-handed weapons synergize with in World of Warcraft. Okay, the only other thing they really synergize with is parry haste, but you have to actually get punched in the dick in order for that to happen. And parry gear is so hard to find that it's not really worth talking about. Parry haste is the only other thing that I could that reasonably synergizes with two-handed weapons. Now let's compare that to the power of motherfucking dual wielding. The sheer and simple, casual dual wielding, the thing that warriors and rogues can just do, right? Okay, so your offhand weapon when you're dual wielding does 50% of the damage of your main hand weapon. So already we haven't jumped 30% weapon damage from going one-hander to two-hander. We've jumped 50% weapon damage from going one-hander to two-hander. But then it gets worse, because that offhand weapon is also subject to attack power. Even though its damage has been cut in half, it's still gaining a 50% bonus from attack power. So back to our example where it was 100 DPS from attack power, and it was 30 DPS from the one-handed weapon, and then we jumped to the two-handed weapon, and we only gained 9 DPS because it's not affected by attack power at all. Completely different mechanics for two-hander. Two-hander would go up 15 DPS just because of the there's an additional white damage. There's additional weapon damage effect there, but minus 50%. But it's also gaining 50% of the attack power, which was 100 DPS. So it wouldn't go. The two-hander goes from 130 to 139 EU gross. The dual wielder goes from 130 to, let me think. He'd be gaining 50 from the attack power and 15 from the white damage, so it's 65, so he'd be going up to 195. That is a massive DPS increase. And on top of that, it's kind of in other words, two-hander's the only thing that causes your attack power stat. My bad. Dual wield, two-handed, two-handed. Damn it! What am I trying to say? Two-hander doesn't synergize with your attack power at all. Dual wielding absolutely does, and that's why you start getting into this final statement here, which is this exponential scaling type effect. So rogues, warriors are the number one DPS because they also have the rage bar on top of that, right? And the rage bar is going to mean that the more white damage they do causes them to do more damage, which causes them to do more damage, which causes them to do more damage, right? So warriors have an additional, their rage bar is an additional scaling mechanic. So the scaling mechanics in World of Warcraft are attack power, critical strike, and then your abilities, and basically what are almost nothing else. When you're dual wielding, you're getting a double dipping on the attack power. The attack power starts becoming absolutely insane, and on top of that, it starts scaling with anything else you got going on, like critical strike, and so it's starting to scale very hard. You can see this with rogues. This is why I keep talking about dual wielding so much here. Notice I'm not talking about the warrior's rage bar at all. I'm very specifically talking about the fact that they can dual wield. Why is this? It's because rogues have competitive DPS with warriors, and they don't even have a damn rage bar. Why is that? Maybe it's because they can also dual wield. There's a possibility there, right? Um, so, anyways, basically, whatever change you want to make for Paladin to try to get them competitive DPS wide in a raid scenario has to somehow find a way to be competitive with dual wielding and or competitive with a Paladin's rage bar. The other thing that makes rogues absolutely terrifying in their DPS is they just have absolute tons of baseline DPS built into their class in general. So basically, a rogue butt naked still does crazy amounts of DPS. All right. So the point is that Crusader Strike isn't even going to scratch it at all in Classic World of Warcraft. This is not Burning Crusade. In Burning Crusade, there's a bunch of other little bonuses and stuff that are going on behind the scenes. Not to mention warriors and rogues get slightly, maybe not rogues, get slightly nerfed in Burning Crusade. But at the end of the day, Crusader Strike is not even going to get you close. You would need two Crusader Strikes before you get anywhere near the power of dual wielding. Or you need your Crusader Strike on like a 3-second cooldown, which is actually ridiculous. What you specifically need is you need something that can scale so hard on a Paladin that it's actually competitive with the power of dual wielding, and God forbid the power of dual wielding combined with the power of a damn rage bar, right? And so you need to see that kind of exponential growth synergy in the DPS in the class design, if that makes any sense. How long is this video so far? 23 minutes? It's not the worst thing in the world. All right, so my point is that if you give a Paladin dual wielding, it's not going to do much of anything. What makes it even worse is that as I say, dual wielding, you give them Crusader Strike, it's not really going to scratch anything. So I agree with SFan. Tweaking some of the things underneath the hood is good, but if you're going to tweak stuff underneath the hood, you might as well do it in a interesting and compelling way that's going to vex people trying to figure out how best to gear Paladin for years to come. And so, anyways, I think my proposal of flat increasing the chance for Seal of Command to proc, based upon the critical strike chance of the Paladin, is definitely one way to go, because at the very least you can see an exponential growth of the Paladin's DPS linked directly to what a stat they want to stack anyways, which is damn it, what is it? Critical strike chance. Because Paladins want to strike critical strike chance because they want to keep Vengeance uptime as much as possible. But once they, the problem with them is that there's no exponential growth here. Once they have enough critical strike chance that their vengeance uptime is virtually 100%, there's no double dipping in value of critical strike, right? In their gearing. What's worse about this is that it's only a 15% bonus. It might be a little bit more than that. You could say 20% at most with the double dipping that Seal of Command is doing. But it's still absolute. That there's nothing in here that even remotely competes with the sheer act of dual wielding. If you got rid of all these talents and just gave paladins the ability to dual wield, like they would just kill everything in its dog. Their DPS would skyrocket to the moon. Dual wielding is overpowered, is basically what I'm trying to say. I might as well title this video "Dual Wielding is Overpowered." So they need something that will scale virtually exponentially with it to try to keep up, and what they have in their toolkit just isn't going to do it. Seal of Crusaders not really going to do it either, because again, there's no exponential scaling on Seal of Crusader. It's literally just a flat scaling. It's like, oh, once we get it, we do a little bit more DPS, and then once we get enough critical strike to keep vengeance up, where's the rest of our scaling? Where's the exponential growth that we're competing with from dual wielding and a rage bar? Oh, it's not there. Okay, great. Meanwhile, if you give them something closer to what I suggest, then yeah, you're going to have a built-in exponential scaling for the paladin that keeps in line with the class identity and gives a very unique gearing dynamic, because now you don't know if you want the slowest two-handed weapon possible. You probably want a faster two-handed weapon, and on top of that, Seal of Command starts becoming fascinatingly viable as a one-handed paladin and for potential tanking purposes and so forth and so on in that category. But take it from me as a longtime paladin player, if you suggest to give paladin Seal of Command on a 3-second cooldown in raids, only in raids, or what I just proposed in raids, they're going to jump at my my suggestion way before Seal of Command, just because, yeah, it is what it is. Now the other thing to talk about is Seal of Righteousness. So tanking in classic World of Warcraft for paladins is a very easy solution. You just give them a taunt. Preferably, you give them a non-resistible, non-failing taunt. Why is that kind of a big deal? Warriors have 3 taunts. I'm not sure how many taunts druids have, but if you just give paladins 1 taunt and it can fail, people are going to be like, why don't we have the warrior tank? Other than that, there's nothing wrong with paladin tanks in classic World of Warcraft pretty much at all. They could definitely use not so much a damage bonus with Seal of Righteousness. They could use a threat generation bonus buff, like improved Righteous Fury could easily be doubled, in my personal opinion. Because again, you're competing with the Fury Warrior tank, who's got dual wielding and has got the rage bar behind him. I mean, Jesus Christ, give the paladin something if you want them to ever even think about tanking. The only other that's not really true. No, I think they're pretty good in the tanking department. In the grand scheme of things, when it comes to all that. I'm trying to think, is there any real benefit to buffing Seal of Righteousness in raids, like directly? Because there's an ocean of difference between buffing the threat generation of Seal of holy damage abilities and buffing Seal of Righteousness specifically in a raid context. The problem with buffing Seal of Righteousness is, oh right, that was an ability that I thought would be interesting on Paladin. One of the major issues with gearing a Paladin tank specifically is you have to choose between your best tanking gear and mitigation gear. You can't have both. So, for example, you choose between defense rating gear and spell power gear. Spell power gear is the gear you end up tanking with because it's the gear that causes you to hold threat. So in a way, you end up kind of being a Fury Warrior, but you don't scale anywhere near as hard. A Fury Warrior tank, that is, specifically. Let me drink water. My throat. Burns. Um, Fury Warrior specifically, blah, 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 blah. Right, so as it stands, uh, Paladin has to choose between mitigation gear or the spell power gear, and I find myself very curious which one it might be better to buff. Not that you really need mitigation gear in classic World of Warcraft tanking. You just need people constantly healing you. But I'm not the biggest fan of Paladin tanks in general. Maybe you could give something to Holy Shield, mess with Holy Shield in a raid environment. Holy Shield could be buffed in general, like in Classic WoW, and nobody would even bat an eye at it. Like if you increase the charges of Holy Shield from 4 to 8, and just pretend it's TBC, that would not change the game in the slightest. It wouldn't change it wouldn't change leveling too terribly much. It would just give people another leveling option. It wouldn't change PvP in the slightest. It wouldn't really change rating in the slightest. It's just something Holy Shield just straight up needs. I'm not even gonna lie. Holy Shock is in a very similar vein. The stats and ratio on Holy Shock are absolutely garbage and are absolutely terrible. You could easily buff them a little bit, not very much, just a little bit. But the number one thing that needs to happen to Holy Shock in Classic World of Warcraft is, why the fuck is it a 30-second cooldown? Like, please, for the love of God, can somebody like make this thing at least 20 seconds? Even at 20 seconds, this thing is hot garbage. You could make it 15 seconds and it would be even somewhat remotely better. But yeah, but that's pretty much all I have to really say about Paladin in Classic World of Warcraft. I'll think about the tanking thing a little bit, but it's the problem I have with it is, let me think. So as it stands, we're currently pigeonholed into using the spell power gear. We can't actually use mitigation gear. So you'd probably want to give a buff to Holy Shield specifically, or the like, where or you could to make the class more interesting, you can give it to Righteous Fury when you enter raids, where you increase the threat generation of your holy damage and abilities by a percentage equal to your total mitigation percentage, or something stupid like that. Just something that lets the paladin wear absolute tons of mitigation gear, and at the same time increase their threat relatively high. That would give them an interesting contrast as a tank to the other tanks. So warriors, of course, they can fury tank, and they have all their natural abilities, which are absolutely amazing. Their anti-fear capability, and so forth and so on. You have the druid tank, which is basically just a HP pool brick shithouse. And then you'd have a paladin tank, which would have less HP than all of those combined. But in theory, he should be more of a mitigation and resistance-based tank compared to the other two. Definitely give him a unique class identity that might make you want to take him under certain circumstances, but not other under ones. Anyways, I'm going to try to end the video here, and Deus Volt, boys. Yep, is what it is. I can't remember. There was some other video I wanted to make, but I can't remember what it was. But I'll think about it. But again, you might not hear from me for a few days. Voice is going, yada, yada, yada. Is what it is. All right, Deus Volt.